Hello everybody, welcome to Planet FPL, the world where everything revolves around Fantasy Premier League. My name's Suj.
And my name is James.
The football starts again a couple of days after we've all had our turkey or chicken or
Oh, you sound
vegan
excited.
roast.
Can tell someone didn't watch Man City v Liverpool last night.
Nope.
No, neither did I actually, in fairness. But I heard it was a cracker and was the pace was very different to World Cup matches, so I hear.
Okay, end to end.
A
Was
lot
it 3-2
faster.
or something?
Yeah, City won 3-2. Both teams missed good chances through the game. Most notably, Darwin Núñez, who, subject to the opinion you read, is either Timo Werner reincarnated or he's about to go mental, basically, depending on what your narrative spin is. We are today on this podcast going to be having a look at our current drafts. And I would say with current drafts, i.e. if the game was launching right now and the first game was this morning, then these are the teams that we would go with. We are obviously entitled over 72 hours to change it. There's going to be information from press conferences after we've recorded today and stuff. So I wouldn't say this is definitive. This is what we're doing, but this is the intention. I don't know how it is for you, Suj, but I think I'm at peace with it until I say I'm at peace with it. On the Sky podcast yesterday, I was at peace with everything, and literally, as soon as I walked out of this room yesterday, Roberto Firmino's injured. He's got a calf problem. Okay, let's change that again. So I'm at peace currently, but there's certain things that could change. But I think if there's no injury or press conference news that concerns me, what I've got is what I'll go with.
Yeah, I'm at peace with my team as well. There are so many 50-50 calls in this that you can overthink it till you're blue in the face. Yep. And for me, it's like, would I rather spend the next 48 hours thinking a 50-50? And some people might disagree that they're 50-50. Some people...
Or would you rather drink all weekend and enjoy yourself?
Well, I did the last of my Christmas shopping yesterday, which was beer. And I had some super dry Asahis and some Brewdogs.
Please, by the way, drink responsibly on Christmas Day, particularly if you do think you're going to be tinkering with your FPL team.
Don't drink an FPL.
Don't drink an FPL.
Yeah. So I'm just not going to overthink it, to be honest with you. I had a fair idea of where I was going with my squad anyway. But yeah, I think I'm fairly happy with it. There's not going to be a single player in here that I've chosen that you'd be like, they're shit.
How do you know?
There's only one punt in there. If you remember the start of the season, I ended up going with as many players from the big six as I possibly could. And then I had Nico Williams, Patterson and Andreas Pereira as like my free budget players.
You've done the
same. My entire squad is made up of big six, except Kinder Bueno, 2 Fulham players, and then reserve goalkeeper Danny Ward. And I've allowed Newcastle to actually be part of the big seven. I was
just about to say, so there's no Newcastle.
It's Trippier. I'll count him as part of the big seven now, really, because they're doing so well. No
Miguel Almiron.
No Miguel Almiron.
Have you not learned anything?
No Miguel Almiron. As it stands, no Miguel Almiron.
I've not got him either.
So yeah, I'll tell you my squad. So my goalkeepers...
I'm going to jump in at certain bits, but
pre-World Cup was Nick Pope and Danny Ward. It's now Kepa Arrizabalaga and Danny Ward.
That's the popular combo that we're seeing a lot. I think for you and myself, if we were to see things on Kepa's had a setback over the weekend, then we'd probably change. My take, and I'm also going to go Kepa as well, I might as well say that now. My take is that I've got cover for Danny Ward if Kepa doesn't make it. He has been in training. We think he'll play, and it's exactly what I'd said to you earlier in the week, Suj. I think I'd rather start there and move than think, fuck, I should have gone there.
Correct.
That's my big take on Kepa.
I had 5 defenders before the World Cup, as we all did. I had Cancelo, Trippier. They're the only 2 that make it beyond the unlimited. I had Ivan Perisic, Lewis Dunk, and Mark Gahey pre-World Cup. Obviously, that was very fixture dependent and strategic. Perisic was a bit of a punt just before the final kind of couple of games. So they have been replaced. Kinder Bueno is in. He's just the cheap budget enabler. He'll sit third on my bench most weeks, if not every single week, James. I've replaced Perisic with Reece James. and I've added Ben White into the mix as well. I had 5.1 for that last defender slot. I think Ben White will just tick along there. Most weeks, I'll be playing a back three of Cancelo, James and Trippier. Ben White might not even make the team some weeks, mate. So Ben White's fine. So yeah, James, Bueno, Cancelo, Trippier, White. My midfield pre-World Cup, James, was Andreas, Phil Foden, Mo Salah, Gabriel Martinelli, and the troll that is Wilf Zaha.
I presume that's gone.
My midfield, James, after the World Cup is Andreas, Foden, Salah, Martinelli, and not Wilf Zaha.
I thought you was going to say you're going to keep him for the 2 games. They do have 2 good fixtures.
One change, and that is to bring in your boy, the ginger from Sweden, Dejan Kulusevski.
Go on, elaborate on that choice then.
I think he's just he's a really good asset and a really good player. Since he joined the club, he's consistently performed, mate.
I mean, I can't argue that. Do you not think? I suppose I should probably jump in at this point. Have you left any money in the bank?
0.4.
So, would you not prefer Maddison as an example?
Would I not prefer Rashford as an example? Would
I
not prefer
Saka
as an example? This is a 50-50 for me, mate. It's a 50-50 for me. And I've got recency bias or ownership bias, if you'd call it that, with Decky. He's always done well for me whenever I've owned him. The only times I've ever had to sell him is when he's bloody got injured. So, and I don't want I don't want an entire template team, James. Because you're
No, that's absolutely fine.
My front three, I started the pre-World Cup. I had Haaland, I had Dominic Solanke, and I had Callum Wilson. I've only Haaland's stayed the course.
How did I end up with Schumacher and you didn't?
I had him in Sky, mate. Mitrovic has come in.
Yep.
And I've taken a punt on Make Me Streak Naked Eddie and Ketcher.
Are you really going with it?
I'm going to go with it.
Wow. Okay.
He's benchable for me. It wouldn't be long term, but if 1 week or 2 I had to bench him, I would. I think he's going to play.
You'll probably pick him over Ben White.
Yeah.
I imagine.
Especially this week.
Most of the upcoming choices.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Well, in a weird way, no, I'd arguably, I'm not saying I'd pick Ben White over Nketiah this week. I wouldn't. But I'm just saying, logically, if there was a week that you were going to go that way, maybe it would actually be this week, because the upcoming games, the more you look at them, the more you're going to think, don't know if Arsenal are getting a clean sheet here. I don't know.
So it's fairly template across the board, other than I think Kulu and Nketiah are like slight wild card picks, and they're also they're good, mate.
I feel like your team is already more exciting than mine. Spoiler, if you want to switch off.
Yeah, Eddie Nketiah is an absolute punt, right? It's an absolute punt, but we know he's going to play. They haven't got another striker that can play, so unless they're going to put Martinelli up top or play Saka as a striker, which I don't see them doing.
Arteta made some interesting comments this week about him viewing Martinelli solely as a wide forward / winger. Yeah. Which very much suggests that Nketiah will.
He did well at the end of last season. They were raving about him. It was all.
I think, to be honest, in the short term, the biggest dangers to Nketiah staying through the middle would be a new signing. Mm-hmm. Or I think, judging by what Arteta said this week, arguably even maybe Emil Smith-Rowe, if he can get himself fit, where they might use him in that role where he comes off the front, which I think could be quite exciting for Martinelli in behind. But I think, it does look like Nketiah will play.
City. So I started with Cancelo, Foden, Haaland. I'm sticking with that. Kevin De Bruyne was obviously a big debate for a lot of people, Salah or KDB or both. But I think I want to go with Salah and Foden as the combo. And I think they're fine. Foden was decent when he played in the World Cup, so I think he'll come back and hit the ground running.
Yeah, I think most people who choose to go Mo over KDB will land with Foden, which is perfectly reasonable. It's interesting looking at as a combination of two might be more interesting than, I don't know, KDB and Saka, KDB and Maddison, KDB and Kulusevski. Obviously, in your case, you've lined it up where you've got 2 midfielders at kind of the 8 million to 8.5 bracket, which I quite like, actually, Suj, to be honest. I think my concern for you might be with what you've got is and just kind of sense check this over the next couple of days and say to yourself, if this player gets injured or suspended or whatever, what am I doing? So, for example, you've got Mitrovic. He's on 4 yellow cards. What's your plan? If Alexander Mitrovic gets booked at Crystal Palace on Monday, what's your plan for game week 18? Now, that plan could be, I'm going to bench him, and they've got the double. But
I've got 4 players here lined up for the double in 19. The 2 Chelsea at the back and Chelsea defence versus Fulham attack.
Yeah.
So it's not really ideal, but I think a lot of people are going to be set up that way.
I think you might be right.
It's going to be a problem. But that's the double, right? So they've got another game as well. It's not just Chelsea Fulham in that week. So they can score points elsewhere.
All right, so let's use the different example. What are you doing if Nketiah gets injured?
I'll probably downgrade him, to be honest with you. I'll probably go down cheap and use the money elsewhere. I might go up from Martinelli. Yeah.
Okay, captain this week, do we need to...
No.
You're still going to go with him? Leeds have been good in the big games this year.
So is Haaland.
It's been good in nearly every game. So. Yes, I'll be captain Haaland as well.
And the poor guy hasn't played football for like a month and has had to watch his teammates and that go and play in a World Cup. And this whole debate about Messi being the greatest ever, he's got a fucking point to prove. He's going to smash him.
There's a little bit more Haaland stuff to come. I'm going to do a little bit more on fixtures once I've gone through my team. But I just wanted to ask you first, Suj, before I move on to my team. Is there anyone you've got rid of who you're up in value on? Or let's say, have you actually made the transfers? No, which is the right thing to do, by the way. Leave it till at least you start drinking.
0.1.
Yeah.
He's gone up 0.2 and I've made 0.1. Lewis Dunk's gone up 0.1, I've made nothing. Gahey's gone up 0.1, I've made nothing. Perisic is flat. Zaha's gone up 0.2 and I've made 0.1.
You made money on Zaha?
Yes, mate.
That's incredible.
Made me feel good about myself. And Callum Wilson has gone up 0.2, I've made 0.1. Dominic Solanke's flat.
The reason I mention that, and that's all perfectly fine, Suj, is the psychological element to a lot of decisions. And I think I'll give Martinelli and Almiron here as examples. I've owned Martinelli since game week 1, bought at 6.0, is now 6.8. To move that to Odegaard, if that was something I wanted to do, for example, seems a little bit daft when it kind of is a coin flip anyway. I might as well stay where I've got the value and I'm giving myself more money to spend by not making that transfer. Whereas Almiron, I haven't owned.
Yeah.
So if I go in on Almiron now, I'm at the back end of the value. So just be conscious, particularly when you're on social media and person X says, well, no, I think you need to have Almiron over Martinelli or vice versa, that the value to you is quite important. Whether we like it or agree with it or not, it is a huge reference point. So that's not to say you can't buy Martinelli or Almiron new now. Of course, you absolutely can. They're both very good, reasonable assets. But the value that you have built up psychologically to move it, you've got to be, if you're 0.8 or 0.6 up on a player, for example, you've got to be so sure when you're selling that player, haven't you?
Yep.
I'm almost realistically with Martinelli, unless he has a huge dip in form or an injury, he's staying. He's probably staying for me till the end, unless Arsenal don't land with a double and I want to use a bench boost or something like that. He's going to stay till close to the end, I think, because that's such good value. And I think we can be more confident of that than Almiron's.
Yep.
Almiron is not going to score world-class worldies every week as he has been doing, but he is incredible form. I saw him live at White Hart Lane a few weeks before we shut down, and that is a very different footballer to what I've seen in the past. Like, he's just a bloody good player now. So he's perfectly reasonable. I think he's the best sub-6 million midfielder, to be honest. So I don't have him, but it's because I don't have a player at that price bracket at the moment. I too, Suj, have gone with Ward and Kepa.
Kepa the keeper.
Yeah. Just to add on to that, looking ahead, and I've looked up to game week 24. I don't think it's worth looking any further than that because game week 25 has the Carabao Cup final. We now have 3 fixtures locked in for that date, Suj, which is Everton against Villa, Tottenham against Chelsea, and now we know Liverpool's trip to Crystal Palace. Those 3 games will definitely go ahead in game week 25. We are almost certain to have 2 postponements in that game week. Do you know the Carabao Cup draw, Suj?
No.
Just out of interest. Man United v Charlton, which is a headache for the schedulers. I'll come back onto that. Southampton v Man City, Newcastle v Leicester, and Nottingham Forest versus Wolves. So look, we're likely to have 2 Premier League finalists. With the best respect to Charlton, so we're likely to have 2 postponements in that week. And there's every chance, let's be honest, that Man City could be one of them, and a lot of us will have treble ups and stuff. So it's really not worth at this stage looking further ahead than game week 24. I'd pick Kepa in all but 1 over Ward. The only one I'd pick Ward in is when Chelsea go to Liverpool in game week 21. Ward doesn't have a brilliant fixture that day either. He's got Brighton at home, but it's more interesting, I think. And yes, I'm aware that Liverpool could end up playing Chelsea twice that week, so it could change. And I'll speak about that a little bit more about that possibility at the end. Defensively, a little bit like with yourself, Suj, Cancelo and Trippier, value built up, great assets, not going anywhere for me. At least until, in both cases individually, Newcastle have a drop-off. Or in Manchester City's case, that it becomes blindingly clear that, oh my God, Nathan Ake is playing every game. This is worth the saving. Like, I don't know what's happening with City's centre-backs. It has become a little bit clearer, Suj, because Ruben Diaz is out for around about a month. So we are down from 5 to 4 for the choice at the moment. I wouldn't read, on Manchester City specifically, I wouldn't read anything into that team last night in terms of defensive assets and what to expect next. Like Cancelo Walker didn't play. I wouldn't read too much into that at all from last night. Reece James is in. I don't particularly like having double Chelsea defence.
Especially when both of them are flagged.
Reece James is definitely back in the sense that he played 60 minutes in a behind closed door friendly with Brentford. And I think, look, at this stage, we've had people coming back from the World Cup and I've only had like 10, 15 minutes or so. Harry Kane's going to play for Tottenham on Monday. He is going to go straight from the France match into Brentford, right? So I think players are at different stages. The 60 minutes against Brentford tells me that he's ready to start a game of football. It doesn't mean that he's nailed or he's locked, and he definitely will. If he doesn't start against Bournemouth, it's an inevitability that it's coming afterwards. So I'm okay with that. The pick of Reece James isn't... I was thinking about this morning, because up until the start of the week, I was pretty set on having Dalot, who's now an injury doubt himself. And obviously speaking to Gary Robinson on Clash the Correspondents on Wednesday, also kind of really downplaying the idea, saying, look, the whole starting back 4 could be missing against Forest. Do you really want to invest in it in any case? But what I was thinking was, if Reece James was a Manchester United player, would I still pick him? And the answer is yes. The pick of Reece James isn't reflective on Chelsea. The pick of Reece James is reflective on Reece James and the potential for him as an offensive asset as much as the defensive one. So he's in at the moment. I like the fact that he's in and around the value of between a few things, like the jumps up to Liverpool or downgrade in value. Ben White is in. Cheapest, best Arsenal asset, in my opinion. And for those who've obviously had another good example, William Saliba since the start, I think you're going to start with William Saliba. Potential curveball for Sky Sudges. We think he's returning to Arsenal training today, which seems strange considering the World Cup final was on Sunday, wasn't it? Yep. Sometimes it feels like yesterday, sometimes it feels like weeks ago. We think he might be rejoining Arsenal training today. If he is, there's every chance he will now play on Monday against West Ham. So I think if you own Saliba from the start, you're not switching that over. Again, you're going to hold your value. You're going to stay with Saliba. I've not owned him. So Ben White, I invested in at 4.6 before his price rise on the final day of game week 16. So he's in for me. I'm most commonly going to start him, Suj, which will become more obvious. My 5th defender is Hugo Bueno. One of the exercises I did earlier in the week was I was looking at having the exact back four I've got and Dallo instead of Bueno. And I did the exercise of looking up to game week 24 and seeing if I go with these 5 decent defenders from top 7 teams, I'm commonly not going to be playing them all. Who am I leaving out? And it was a repetitive theme that after the first 3, quite often, despite being an offensive fullback, I would leave Dallo out quite a lot. So he was always likely to be, if I downgraded, the one that was for the chopping block. Plus, even more so, with the cup results, we know we've got an Arsenal double in 23. Admittedly, yes, Manchester City's one of the fixtures. We could even end up with another Arsenal double over this period. So I think even if Dallo had been fit, I was leaning towards Ben White and having that ready. And let's say he's kind of going to be looking like my 11th starter, I would say. Into midfield, I've decided my way round of having Mo Salah or Kevin De Bruyne is to have both. They are both in at the moment. I am setting up with a freemium. I keep looking at it and thinking, shit, I don't have a Kulusevski or a Saka or a Maddison or a player at that value.
Yep.
But I can obviously drop one of these guys and get to it.
Back the money.
So they're obviously accessible. I think it become clearer again what I might do with the rest of the money should I decide to do that. I think it's such a close call, and I don't want to land on the wrong side of it. I said a lot in the weeks leading up to the World Cup. I obviously had Foden, which was disappointing in the sense game weeks 13, 14, 15, he's on for 1 pointers, unbelievably when he was in incredible form. And we don't know which way Guardiola's going to swing on this. What I do know is that I look ahead at these fixtures and Manchester City have some tough ones. Chelsea, United, Tottenham twice. And then obviously the Arsenal fixture in 23 as well. I know that Big Game Kev plays these games. And the fact that we've got cup games in there as well, I think that's likely to be where his rotations will be. And I think Kevin De Bruyne could play every league game up to game week 23. I didn't watch the game last night, but I've seen what everyone was saying about that ain't the Kevin De Bruyne we watched at the World Cup. He looked like Manchester City Kevin De Bruyne. So if anybody had concerns about, he's got Batshuayi up front rather than Haaland, has that affected him? Well, I think back with his regular teammates looks like it certainly helped him. So I'm going with both at the moment. Martinelli stays for me. I think I've already explained that. Marcus Rashford, he's in. I think he's the best United one to go to. Obviously scored himself against Burnley the other night. He's at a value where it's escapable to, I can come down to Almiron if I've got that wrong, for example. There's loads of ways I can go with it. I certainly want to go in for those 3 fixtures. I also spoke earlier in the week about if I got in a position where I was stuck with him and had to keep him for longer, he's kind of the United asset I'd want for the difficult City and Arsenal fixtures because of his over-the-top pacing behind. Andreas Pereira stays, and that wasn't a certainty for me this week, I have to say. I do have a little bit of value in him, but not enough to make me think, I'm bothered about selling him, for example. What is he, 4.6, I think, Pereira?
Yeah, 4.6.
So, okay, fine, I've had him all season, but I wouldn't have been loath to get rid of him. I think you could go back. And there are certainly good alternatives at that value. I know a lot of people be waiting on the fitness of Crysencio Somerville. Leeds have a good run of fixtures from game week 19. And obviously Leon Bailey as well. He's interesting. Just a note on Bailey, obviously he's on 4 yellows. I have stayed with Pereira at the moment, and I think, as per the conversation I've been having with a lot of the correspondents, like thinking about people like Marcus Tavernier at Bournemouth, although he's an injury doubt, you just keep coming back and going, they've got that double sitting there. Yep. And I've got 2 decent fixtures beforehand as well. So he's ideal, exactly what he's been for me most of this. He's ideal first cover.
Yep.
Which is interesting because a lot of this week I had been looking at Pereira's 3rd sub. And you start thinking, well, what's the point? Well, the point is there wasn't much to come back further down to anyway. So I do intend to use Pereira mainly as first sub. And subject to condition, i.e. a fixture, I may even choose to play him in certain fixtures. So, looking further ahead, Forest at home in game week 23, like I might choose to play him, for example. Up front, Haaland needs no explanation. Mitrovic is in. My take, I asked Usage about escapes. One of the escapes for me, I think if he was to get booked, I think he's probably more commonly if he gets booked in game week 19, and then you've got Newcastle away, Tottenham at home, Chelsea away. I am going to want to escape it. Or even let's look at it a different way. He doesn't get booked, but he blanks in those 4 fixtures. And you think, I don't want this. I've got escapes. And I think Che Adams, as I'd spoke about him a couple of weeks ago, and the more the week dragged on, the more I kept coming back and looking for it. I just couldn't justify picking him over Mitrovic with the double in 19. What I would say, thinking about it more, is unless Mitrovic gets booked in 17, I don't think I'd be captaining Mitrovic in 19, knowing that he could get a 1-pointer at Leicester and then be suspended for Chelsea, and that would be the end of it.
I'm with you on that.
But I think in any case, we can get a little bit obsessed with the yellow cards things, comparing it with people like Bailey, for example. Depending on where you're at, you may or may not want to use him. For most people, if they go for Leon Bailey, if he gets booked, doesn't matter. He sits on the bench for a week. And with Mitrovic, in any case, I think he's proven that he can do it at this level. The only concern would be, is he 100% fit? He looked fine for Serbia.
Yeah.
He's not the most mobile player in any case, so if he's hampered by speed, that's not a huge issue. For him, it's all about if the delivery in the penalty area is correct, can he do the business? And I think Palace, Southampton, then double, I don't want to be on the wrong side of that, so he's in for me. Third forward, because obviously I've run out of money, is Sam Greenwood at 4.2. It has to be.
KDB and Salah double up. There's going to be...
Look, I've seen some teams with 4. I've seen Salah, De Bruyne, Haaland, and Kane. I think that's possibly a little bit too prohibitive. But Formium. But going with these 3, I've not kind of negotiated on James, Trippier, Cancelo. They're still in there. Kane was never really on the table for me anyway. He's also obviously on 4 yellows, and I feel like that's more like one, if Harry was to get booked on Boxing Day and miss Villa at home, because of the money, you do feel compelled to move that. Now, of course, you can go to, if you haven't got Darwin Núñez, you can go Darwin Núñez for 1 game and go back if you want to, but you might be giving yourself a problem immediately. In my case with Mitrovic, I fully intend to roll in game week 17. So, I mean, if Mitrovic was to get booked against Palace, as long as I escape injuries, my take would be, I'm just fucking playing Pereira against Southampton and go on. I know Pereira would be on the pens as well, right? If Mitrovic was to be suspended. So that would be my solution. So I'm looking to line up with a 4-4-2, which would commonly be playing Ben White. And I think a lot of people might not be in that position. I think they showed us prior to the World Cup that they're stronger defensively than people are giving them credit. They've also got this weird stat where Nottingham Forest was their only home clean sheet, going back to a victory against Leicester in March. And I spoke to Adam Pritchard about this, and we couldn't put our finger on why that was. Just commonly Arsenal were winning home games 2-1, 3-1 was basically how it was going. It was a 5-1 against Everton in May. They've had a lot of clean sheets away from home as well. And I look at things like, could they go to Brighton and win 1-0 in game week 18? The answer is yeah. I've seen my team do that. So they're definitely capable of doing it. They're also capable of getting turned over at Brighton. I think on their day, Brighton can turn over a number of teams. But yeah, unless something spooks me in the next few days, I'm going to forget about it. And that's the team I'll be going with. Kepa, James, Trippier, White, Cancelo, Salah, De Bruyne, Martinelli, Rashford, Mitrovic, Haaland, subs, Ward, Pereira, Bruno, Hugo Bueno, not Bruno Fernandes, and Sam Greenwood, but he's definitely the cheap forward go-to. I mean, at 4.2, that's a gift for a player who, let's be honest, he's regularly going to pick up 1-pointers. Adam Forshaw may influence his minutes. Third sub, am I going to need it often? Not really, particularly Suj, when we might have more doubles on the horizon. How aware are you or not aware of what may or may not happen? And for the Sky listeners, apologies, I did cover a lot of this yesterday. So you should be aware of some fucking shit, Suj.
Well, yeah, I feel like it's a very loaded question because we talked about it on yesterday's pod. So the actual question you're asking me is, do you listen to me when we're sitting on the table talking to each other about rearrangements? The takeaway that I had yesterday from the Sky pod was, is it Brighton Palace? Is the most likely game to be rescheduled and it's in that week after the 22nd, 23rd of January before is it 4th, 5th, 3rd, 4th, 5th of February?
Or Bournemouth versus Brighton.
Okay. So a Brighton fixture. Brighton was the team that we led with yesterday. Yeah. The others are going to be a bit more difficult to rearrange. Or if they had an appetite to rearrange them, they would have already done it.
I don't know what the Premier League are going to do. It's really important. All I'm going to do right now is share what I do know and share my opinion. There are, following the Carabao Cup results, there are now 5 fixtures that could get put into, let's say, a January midweek where they could just get thrown in at this stage. So,
is that all of the postponements, or are there more?
No, so I think there's 12 games in total that will need a rearrangement. But due to the Carabao Cup results, there are 5 in theory that could now slot into the Carabao Cup semi-final midweeks, which, by the way, the first and second leg are the same week.
Right.
So you've got game week 21, you've got semi-final first leg, FA Cup fourth round, semi-final second leg, game week 22. So in theory, Brighton could play both those 2 midweeks,
right,
and have a treble game week.
Oh wow, okay.
I really don't think that's going to happen. I think it's quite possible that they may have a fixture added into that period. Brighton's trip to Bournemouth, Brighton's home game with Crystal Palace, now Liverpool and Chelsea, Arsenal, Everton can obviously now go into those earlier midweeks. Why do I feel like there was another fixture which I'm now missing off my list, Suj? So it's Liverpool, Chelsea, Arsenal, Everton, Chelsea, Liverpool, the 2 Brighton fixtures. That's it.
That's
I think.
5.
No, that's 4. The 2 Brighton fixtures: Arsenal, Everton, Chelsea, Liverpool. I don't think there's another one. Okay. The 2 Brighton fixtures: Arsenal, Everton, Liverpool, Chelsea.
Yep.
They could all get thrown into game week 21. One of the real issues with all of those fixtures is that they're all played either side of that game week 21 period. So, for example, Liverpool host Chelsea already in game week 21. Do the Premier League want them to play each other twice? Arsenal go to Everton in game week 22. If the fixture put into game week 21, they're going to have to play each other twice in a row. Brighton have games to rearrange with Bournemouth and Crystal Palace. Brighton played Bournemouth in 22. They played Crystal Palace in 23.
Yeah.
I think there is a slight possibility that we could get a provisional 19 or 20 announcement, I think, possibly, for the Bournemouth-Brighton fixture. The game week 20 midweek, which has had Manchester City and Tottenham scheduled, is also FA Cup third round replays, so it could be a provisional. But I think because of the distance between the 2 clubs, and it's not like a London derby, but they're fairly close, Bournemouth-Brighton, that you could get away with doing it at quite short notice if they wanted to throw it into game week 19 or game week 20 as a provisional. Remember, the Man City-Tottenham game could move if either team draw in the FA Cup third round. Remember, Manchester City have Chelsea in the third round, Tottenham have Portsmouth. So I think that's probably the most likely, is the Bournemouth-Brighton. My take is that probably won't happen. I think if it was to be announced for 1920s, every chance we'd know by Monday. Coming over Christmas, people got made, but it could even be today, I think. Are people going to make announcements over the weekend? Maybe not. I feel like maybe there was a year where there was a Christmas Eve announcement of a fixture, but it's not common to have. I'm sure the Premier League's going to fuck off and go on holiday for a week, probably, aren't they?
They probably already have,
yeah,
mate.
Right, okay. Game week 21 is a more likely.
Wasn't that when they did the announcement about Newcastle and Saudi Arabia, when they rejected the takeover? Didn't they do that on a Friday at like 5 p.m. or something, and then all fucked off somewhere? And it's like no one can respond to anything.
No,
that wasn't at Christmas though, was it?
No, I tell you what, the brilliant one was recently was the Neil Maupay suspension, wasn't it?
Okay.
Wasn't it that no one was working in the office till the Tuesday because it was a bank holiday?
Yeah.
And so they couldn't appeal or something like that. Or there was something administrative that ruled him out of the game on the Tuesday.
I'm sure we've had
ridiculous
transfer deadlines that end on a bank holiday as well, and people can't register the paperwork. August bank holiday, last fucking Monday of August, always. Anyway.
Probably.
We ain't getting an announcement.
The most important thing at this stage is to understand is that these teams that I've mentioned could have a double added, and obviously in, say, Chelsea and Arsenal's case, we're talking about potentially an additional double, and in Brighton's case, we're talking about 2 potential doubles. Game week 21 and 22, anything that goes in there is going to have the headache, except for possibly Brighton v Palace, where 2 teams are going to play each other twice in a row, and it's just a really shit look. It really is a shit look. I don't think is it necessary to do that?
No, but then look at Chelsea. Fulham are playing each other within like 2 or 3 games, like a couple of times, quite in quick succession. You're playing Man City a couple of times in relatively quick succession, aren't you?
Yes, we are. But if you take that as an example, so Tottenham play Man City, what it's scheduled to in the midweek of 20. Then there's Fulham. Then there's the Carabao Cup semi-finals and the FA Cup fourth round. So, I mean, for Manchester City, there's actually 4 games in between.
Okay.
As long as they beat Chelsea in the
Fulham,
Cup third round.
They're playing each other. There's only 1 or 2 games in between.
No, so, I mean, if you look at Chelsea, they've got Palace, Liverpool, potential fourth round of Cup, and then Fulham. It's actually kind of 4 weeks or so.
Okay.
It's not so bad.
No.
And
Maybe
actually,
it feels less on a spreadsheet.
In years gone by, it's not been uncommon for the Premier League to schedule a whole block of fixtures, like in December and January. I've known that before, where we've played a team like on Boxing Day and then played them on a midweek in January, for example. It's not that uncommon, particularly when they want teams to travel a little bit less sometimes for certain fixtures over a winter period. But I think literally twice in a row, I mean, particularly for a big game like Liverpool-Chelsea. Why do that twice in a row? So, if you want my honest instinct, I don't think that the Liverpool-Chelsea game will be added over the January period, and I don't think the Arsenal-Everton fixture will be added either. With the Arsenal-Everton fixture, we have to remember that this was always possible to be arranged. So what's the wait?
Yeah.
What's the wait with Arsenal-Everton? They've both been out the Carabao Cup since the previous round. So why wait if you intend to put it over this January period? It could happen, but I don't know why you would have waited all this time when we've had a whole fucking World Cup in between that you could have notified Everton fans to say, hey, guess what? You're going to play at Arsenal in the 3rd midweek in January. It doesn't make sense to me. And on the Brighton fixtures, unlike the Liverpool, Arsenal, Chelsea fixtures, what's the rush? No, their opponents aren't involved in Europe. They're not involved in Europe. Those 2 fixtures could be played in April and May, and it's not going to cause a fixture problem or anything. So again, what's the rush? The Crystal Palace fixture particularly will need obviously a heavy police operation because they hate each other because there's a motorway or something. The Bournemouth fixtures is low profile, wouldn't be trouble, and the distance isn't so big. So I think that's the most likely fixture to be added. But my honest take right now is I'm not sure that any additional fixtures will be added in January. Now, there are certain things that could crop up, for example. Let's just say that, I'll give you an example. Southampton lose to Crystal Palace in the 3rd round of the Cup and Brentford lose to West Ham. That's a fixture that's hanging, Southampton-Brentford. That could be played on FA Cup 4th round weekend.
Yep.
Sits on a Saturday like Burnley and Watford did last year.
Last year.
But we can't see that sort of thing right now. And again, it's another one, would they have to rush? There's a couple of alternative dates to add Arsenal and Liverpool fixtures, which I think are a little bit probably better in terms of planning. So the Arsenal-Everton fixture actually could go into game week 24 with very little problem. And at least then, Arsenal will have 3 other league games between the first Everton fixture and the second one. It's a bit longer to plan. Arsenal obviously don't play in the Europa League last 32. So game week 24, I think, is a possibility for Arsenal-Everton. And similarly, for Liverpool, them and Chelsea obviously play on alternative midweeks in the Champions League. So if you want to arrange that fixture now, you do need to get it into this January period. However, we've got another game with Wolves, which you can't arrange at the moment because Wolves have obviously got through to the Carabao Cup quarterfinals. But there is no reason that Liverpool versus Wolves could not be played on one of the 3 midweeks where Liverpool don't play in the Champions League. And those are game weeks 26 and 23. Liverpool also play at Wolves in game week 22. But there is an Everton fixture in between. So I think Liverpool v Wolves in patch 23 or 26 is just as likely as the Chelsea game getting brought forward. And that solves a Liverpool fixture headache problem where Liverpool-Chelsea could just be nearer the end of the season in game week 29 or 34, for example. So I think be aware of the possibilities, but there might not be anything extra in January.
Yeah, I'm not too worried, James. I'll tell you why. Because I'm set up for hopefully 3 or 4 weeks with my squad anyway. And touch wood, no injuries or suspensions, I can make moves towards that. If I get injuries or suspensions, I can react with moves towards that kind of thing, right? So we'll see how this cookie crumbles.
I've set my team up where things obviously come in the way, like suspensions and injuries and stuff. But I've set the team up where I'm not really intending moves. I've said I'm looking to roll in game week 18. What move would I make currently for game week 19 if I don't have any issues? Generally, I haven't got a clue. It might be that I just dive in for a third Chelsea player and dive straight back out if I'm happy with the squad. So I think if suddenly we did end up in a position where game week 21 treble for Brighton, I'll probably get there with a -4 and have 3 if I want, where I'll just remove KDB or Salah and move Bueno up, move Greenwood up and do it that way. There's loads of things I think I could do. So just being aware. The other thing just to be a little bit aware of is Manchester United. And I said that obviously playing Charlton was a headache for the schedule. And the reason it's a headache for the schedule is should United make the Carabao Cup final, obviously now highly likely to make the semi-final, or, there's no or actually, and they make the FA Cup semi-final, then Manchester United would have 5 games to rearrange and there are only 3 available midweeks for them during the season. That's also obviously if they make the Europa League semi-finals. So I know there's a lot of people thinking, could they throw a Man United fixture in? So the thinking was, if United lost their Carabao Cup quarter-final, could they very quickly have a double in 21? And the answer to that is yes. However, they're unlikely to lose to Charlton in the Carabao Cup quarter-finals, would be my take. It's possible if they heavily rotate, etc. So you should be aware that Manchester United suddenly could perhaps have I think it would probably have to be the Crystal Palace rather than a short notice, again, big police operation with Leeds. A trip to Crystal Palace possibly in game week 21. And of course, Crystal Palace have the fixture that could go in with Brighton. And it's another reason why they might not rush to rearrange the Brighton versus Crystal Palace fixture. Last year, I kept screaming, you must rearrange a Chelsea game, you must rearrange a Chelsea game. And they were leaving themselves in a position, weren't they, where eventually they were going to have to play like Tuesday and Thursday.
Yep.
And they managed to avoid it because Chelsea lost in the Champions League semi-final. Otherwise, they would have had to play. Was it semi-final or quarter-final? I can't remember now. I think it was semi-final. But it was only because they lost that they managed to avoid playing twice in 3 days. And if Manchester United progress in all the cup competitions, that will be a real headache after the March international break. However, it's worth pointing out that Manchester United have Barcelona in the last 32 of the Europa League. Barcelona will be favourites to progress. And if Manchester United are knocked out, that problem completely goes away.
So that's a rundown of fixtures in our drafts. I'm going to end this podcast, James, with, unless you've got something to say.
Go for it.
Good luck with your teams. Good luck with your team selections and getting back into the football. If you're going to support your team, enjoy it as well.
Two spots.
After Christmas, just everything you said about fixtures and rearrangements and so on and so on and so on. After Christmas, I'm going to read this headline to you, and then I'm going to say ciao for now. Arctic blast is set to hit the UK again with heavy snow, ice and freezing temperatures over Christmas. They're all going to get postponed and called off anyway. Ciao for now.
Tottenham v Aston Villa clash the Correspondents Tuesday. Have a great Christmas. Be nice to each other and play it your way. Cue music, please, manchild.
It's going to snow, you know.
It's not.
It's going to snow.
It's not.
After Christmas, it's going to get
fucked.
fucked.
It's not.